Okay, so welcome to today's session of the CIPU Colloque. We're joined by Victoria Fara from the city of Oslo and Bart Dhondt. I'm sorry for pronouncing your names probably not correctly, from the city of Brussels. Today we're going to talk about the car-free city, or which role we give different modes of mobility in the city. So today's session is the 8th session in this year's colloque of the CIPU. The CIPU is, as most of you know, a convention from both the Ministry of Spatial Planning, the Ministry of Housing, and the 3 cities of Luxembourg, Esch and Dudelange, and also the city of Differdange, which joined the CIPU this year. Normally we are organizing workshops, excursions, and conferences. So this year we focused mainly on online formats, and our main topic is planning and change, and this comes after the topic of last year, which was climate change adaptation and planning of big urban projects in the year before, and the theme of affordable housing in 2017 and 2018. So we're actually reaching the end of the CIPU convention, of the second CIPU convention this year. So this is one of the last events that we are organizing within this framework before the convention then maybe gets restarted in the next year. You can find more information in English on the CIPU blog or on the page of the CIPU. And just a quick reminder of what we did this year in the colloque. This is the 8th session. We talked about Leipzig-Charta, accessibility, commerce, technical urbanism, instruments for the development of different city districts, gender aspect within urban developments, mobility and public health. And today, which is more where maybe some sort of follow-up to the technical urbanism theme, we're going to talk about the car-free city and what role to give other modes of transport in urban development. So for those of us who listen, you can find all of the documentations, which are partly in German, partly in French, partly in English, on the site of the CIPU. And I'll now give this floor to Victoria from the city of Oslo, hoping that all of this technical stuff will work now. Oops, yeah. So Victoria, if you could also give a quick presentation about yourself, where you come from, what you do, and then you can go ahead with the presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
perfect.
Great.
Good afternoon. My name is Victoria Fara, and I am a mobility planner for the city of Oslo. You might tell I am actually American, and I moved to Oslo about 4 years ago. I have a master in transportation planning from the United States, and about 8 years of experience in both freight planning, so goods delivery, and active mobility planning. So I'm very glad to be here today, and I'm going to be speaking specifically about a project that I'm working on now in Oslo, known as our car-free city life. And I do apologize, it is a lot easier to say in Norwegian, and it doesn't translate terribly well to English, but that's the official English name is car-free city life. So that's what we'll be looking at today. I have a 15-slide presentation for you. And I will start by giving you a little bit of context first about Oslo. And we'll spend, of course, most of my time discussing the Car-Free City Life program, and we'll take some questions at the very end. So, as many of you hopefully know, Oslo is the capital in Norway and is located in the eastern part of the country, approximately 100 kilometers from the Swedish border, which you can see in the map to the right here. Oslo has a total area of approximately 454 square kilometers, 300 of which are actually forest. So Oslo is bordered by a fjord to the south and forest to the north and east. And I like to say that it is shaped like a bowl cut in half. If you can imagine, the fjord and the downtown is rather flat, and then it just slopes up to mountains from there. In the map to the middle, you'll see that Oslo has 3 ring roads. And the city center is located in the smallest ring, Ring 1. And it's the city center which has been the primary focus for the Car-Free City Life program. And that area is highlighted in orange in the map to the left. Before I tell you a little bit more about the program, I thought it was important to mention a couple of overarching goals in Oslo. We have a very ambitious climate agenda with a goal of becoming the world's first zero-emission city. To achieve this, Oslo plans on reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 95% by the year 2030 compared to 2009 levels. The transportation sector accounts for a little under half, I think it's about 47% of direct emissions in Oslo. So consequently, Oslo's climate strategy focuses a lot on reducing car traffic and on achieving a modal shift to more sustainable transportation modes. We have a goal of reaching a 25% bike mode share by 2025. So all these initiatives contributed to earning Oslo recognition as the European Green Capital in 2019. And they're also in line with Norway's national transportation plan, dating all the way back to 2014, when they established a zero growth goal. And the zero growth goal means that any growth in population will not contribute to a growth in car traffic, but rather any additional person trips will be taken by foot, by bike, or by transit. So all these goals create the framework for the Car-Free City Life program, which again focuses on livability, particularly in the city center. The program began in 2017 at the initiative of our local city government. And the program started out with a bunch of different pilot projects and temporary installations. Some of those measures included public art, as you see in the picture to the left, as well as temporary road closures, for example, for outdoor events like an outdoor movie screening in the City Hall Plaza. Since 2017, these pilot projects have been extended or made permanent, for example, through projects to rebuild streets as pedestrian only or pedestrian and bike friendly. The city also adopted an action plan for livability measures back in 2018, but the implementation was restricted by largely outdated land use and zoning rules, some of which were from the 1940s. And so in 2019, the city also adopted a legally binding land use plan, which then enables implementation of the action plan from the year prior. Last year, the city decided to expand the geographic area of Car-Free City Life from within Ring 1, which is the light green area in that map, into the Tøyen and Grønland neighborhoods, which are the dark green areas in that map. We now have pilot projects already underway in the expanded area to include those two new neighborhoods. And we also have some work in progress on a new action plan that encompasses those other neighborhoods. And we expect that final action plan to be completed later this year. So now we're going to look a little bit more closely at specific measures within the Car-Free City Life program, starting with mobility. There are many different traffic groups competing for limited space in Oslo and pretty much every other European city. And through our Car-Free City Life program, Oslo has established a new hierarchy for road users in the city center. Pedestrians come first and private cars come last. And this has also significantly changed the city's relationship to parking. We're focusing much more on accessibility and mobility instead of parking. Since 2017, the Car-Free City Life program has removed over 800 on-street parking spaces. This not only supports a traffic reduction, but also frees curb space for livability measures. Benches, public toilets, drinking fountains, play structures, parklets, bike parking, lighting, and trees have all been established in space that was formerly on-street parking. Any remaining on-street parking at this point is exclusively reserved for either handicap users, goods delivery vehicles, or service vehicles. We have an ongoing pilot project as well that is testing the use of parking sensors, which you see being installed in this picture here. These little sensors just below the surface of each handicapped parking space, which collect data about occupancy rates. And this information can help the city determine the best allocation of handicapped parking spaces a little bit later on. What's also really important is that these sensors transmit information about availability about available spaces in real time to users via an app. And this is critical so that users know where are their handicap spaces and where are there available handicap spaces. And this is a gap that we're trying to fill because a user survey in 2019 showed that 67% of handicap parking users experienced that they never or seldom found an available parking space in the city center. whereas traffic counts in that same period showed that there was actually like a 50% rate of availability of parking at that time. So there's definitely a mismatch between what's happening in the street and what the user's experiencing. And so we're hoping that this pilot project helps to close that gap a little bit. Another essential mobility measure was a new traffic pattern, which was implemented in 2018. The new traffic pattern was designed to eliminate through traffic by restricting north-south and east-west routes, and transit vehicles were exempt from these restrictions. These changes were largely implemented through signage, which I'll come back to later. But for now, I want to highlight the difference between the two signs pictured here. The sign on the left prohibits motorized traffic with the exception of transit buses. And the sign on the right indicates that traffic must drive straight or left with the exception of buses. So they both mean the same thing. They all mean don't turn right into this transit road, but the first has a more restrictive negative connotation, don't drive here, whereas the second sign is a more positive and it's simply directional. So try to remember this for later when I talk about signage again. In addition to mobility measures, Car-Free City Life also implemented a number of physical installations. Some of these have been temporary, such as decorative lighting in the trees during wintertime, and others have been more permanent reconstruction of streets to prioritize pedestrians and cyclists. As part of the new traffic pattern, there was a number of streets that were previously two-way car streets that are now one-way streets with bike lanes on both sides, for example. In the interest of time, though, I'm going to quickly hop through some pictures of these examples. We've established public toilets and drinking fountains. We've established different electrical boxes in public spaces to encourage outdoor events and concerts. We've established parklets with a variety of furniture and vegetation. And my last example shows a variety of play structures. The picture on the left is from our City Hall Plaza, and the picture on the right is from the plaza outside our central train station. What have we learned? Oslo is continually evaluating the Car-Free City program. And the key takeaway today is that traffic has been reduced by almost a third without significantly impacting the local economy. More specifically, traffic counts were conducted in 2016, 2018, and 2019 to measure changes in total traffic volume. Over that period, there was a 28% reduction in traffic in the city center, largely private cars. This change is not entirely attributable to just the Car-Free City Life. There are a lot of other changes both within and outside that area that have likely affected this result. But the Car-Free City Life is definitely a factor in that result. That same analysis shows also reduced delays for transit lines. We have both buses and several tram lines running through the city center. But again, here there were a couple of other factors contributing to that improved punctuality for transit. In 2019, an evaluation of pedestrian activity revealed a 14% increase in the number of pedestrians and a 43% increase in people in public spaces compared to 2 years prior. And these findings are shown in that figure to the right. The green dots indicate a positive change, the yellow dots indicate there is no change, and the red indicates a little bit of a decrease. And then the size of the dot corresponds to the relative change. So that big green dot in the upper left corner of the map represents a 50% increase in pedestrian activity between 2017 and 2019. At the outset, there were many local businesses who were concerned that by removing parking, that would negatively affect their customers. Some economic impact analyses were conducted in 2016, 2017, and 2018 to examine outcomes from various business sectors, both within the city center, Greater Oslo, and then two reference cities, Bergen and Trondheim in Norway. In 2017, there was a 3% growth for businesses in the city center in Oslo, which was very positive. But in 2018, there was a -2% change. So we looked further into this, and the economic analysis at that time concluded that it was actually competition from online shopping that was a greater factor in that negative trend than the actual change in parking situation in the local area. Finally, I want to discuss some ongoing challenges. Car-free city life started with pilot projects and temporary installations, but these temporary installations also require maintenance over if they're going to stand out for a couple of years. They're often contingent upon zoning permits, which are time limited. And oftentimes the actual physical installation has to move around because of roadwork or other planned activities in the streets. And finding an alternate location, even for a short time, can be very challenging. This picture here shows a parklet next to a no parking sign. And in Oslo, no parking is actually a very flexible street use and allows for vehicles to stop and drop off or pick up people or packages. So most goods delivery actually occurs next to a no parking sign because it's a very short activity. But in this case, this parklet is actually right next to a no parking sign. So it's taking up the space that otherwise could be used for goods delivery. And so you see in the a little further back in the picture, there's a delivery truck making delivery, and that delivery person has to walk further to reach their destination, which is likely actually closer to where we see that sign. Changes to the traffic pattern have definitely been a hindrance to goods delivery in the city center. There's been fewer parking spaces, more parklets, more bike lanes. All that together means less space for deliveries. And additionally, the restrictions on the through traffic, more one-way streets, streets dedicated for transit, also means that delivery vehicles often have to drive extra kilometers, assuming they drive legally. A traffic analysis in 2019 revealed that delivery vehicles accounted for up to 80% of traffic violations. We've observed that traffic violations occur because drivers either are confused and don't understand the new rules, or they are frustrated and simply choose to ignore the rules and drive the shortest route possible. Do you guys remember the signs I showed you? Then you probably understand why or how someone could be confused or frustrated trying to understand which way they can actually drive. And the new traffic pattern and all its various restrictions was again implemented purely through signage. So there's nothing physically preventing a car from driving across a plaza that is supposed to be closed for motorized traffic. And that's been a big issue for us. So we're now actively trying to install bollards and gates that can move up and down in order to allow absolutely necessary traffic like emergency vehicles, but otherwise prevent other vehicles from accessing those spaces. And again, at this point, the only remaining parking in the city center is dedicated for handicapped users, delivery vehicles, and service vehicles. And there's a definite disconnect between what's happening in the street, what's available, and what the users perceive. So the issue I mentioned before, where 67% of handicapped users don't find a space when there's actually like 50% of spaces are available, that same statistic essentially applies for delivery vehicles. And so now the Car Free City program is trying to figure out how to optimize location and size of delivery spaces relative to where there's the highest demand. So we'll also evaluate whether the sensors in the handicap project can be a solution for delivery vehicles. And finally, of course, the corona pandemic has been a significant factor here, has had an effect on local travel and commerce. So it's honestly a little difficult to know what the current status is of some of the metrics I've mentioned. But that's something that we're working on, and we're hoping that throughout 2021 and certainly 2022 to have a more normal picture of mobility in Oslo. That was everything I had for you today. I thank you very much for your time and attention, and again, for the invitation to speak to you. I will now turn it over to Sebastian for questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Victoria, for the presentation of this, I would say, a more holistic approach. So you have very concrete measures which are referred to urban furniture, but also very bold measures which are referring to changing land use within the city of Oslo. So therefore, I find it quite interesting. I would like now to open this space for very short, some very few questions. So 1 to 2 questions from the audience. And therefore, if you have a question, just please make sure to unmute your microphone and to switch on your camera, and then you can ask the question directly to Victoria. Or you can also post questions via the chat function, of course. If there are no questions, sorry, please.
I was just going to say I will be sticking around to the end. So if there's a question after the Brussels presentation, we can also take it then. Okay, good. Short question to Lex. Should I then ask a question for sake of asking a question, or should we then go over to the presentation of Bart? Okay, good. Then thank you very much for the presentation again, Victoria. That's kind of you for staying. Then maybe we can have a joint discussion at the very end. I would like now to introduce Bart and would like to hand him over the floor. Bart is actually, I think, the alderman of the city of Brussels in charge of transport. And the project he will be representing is the Vélorution, which also gave some temporary space to cyclists within the city of Brussels. Bart, welcome.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, and thank you for having me. I'll try to launch the presentation first. Just give me a second to do that. And now if I do... I think you can all see the presentation now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for having me. I have a presentation of around 30 slides, but I think I'll try to go through, and there are lots of pictures as well. I think what is interesting is also have some reactions and some feedback, so I'll try to go quick. A few words about Brussels first. So Brussels is the capital of Belgium, and the Brussels region counts 1.2 million inhabitants, and it has a regional government. I am alderman of the city of Brussels, and as you can see here on this slide, Brussels has 19 communes. You can compare them with the districts of Paris, for example. And so the city of Brussels is this. So you can, it's in the city center. It's the city center of the region, Brussels region, but it also goes all the way to the north. It has Laken, it has Neder-Verheembeek, close to the airport, and all the way to the south as well, where we have the Bois de la Cambre, which I will be talking about later on. So that is the city of Brussels. It's quite, it touches around 13 of the communes, so it's really important that if you talk about mobility, there are no frontiers, I would say. So the collaboration between regional government and the different communes is really very important. So that's the city of Brussels. Oh yeah, and here you have the European quarter. Maybe some of you have visited it before for meetings, or now everything is via Zoom, unfortunately. But this is the European headquarters of the European Union. Voila, and here in the city center, we have, you see it on the picture here. Here we, around 2014, so 6-7 years ago, we created a very big pedestrian zone with a big impact on the mobility of the city center and all around. I can get into that later on. So this is the city of Brussels. So I am alderman in charge of mobility, public works, and parking, and I'm a member of the Green Party. In Brussels, there is a majority of socialists and Greens on the local level, city of Brussels, but also on the regional level. And I must say that this is also an important element in implementing different plans, different projects, that there is this political coherence. Also, the elections of 2018 on the local level, people and the press talked about a green wave, and so a lot of local governments, the Greens are represented, and so you have a lot of majorities that are similar. And then in a complex political environment, it comes in handy if the majority colors and coalitions are a bit aligned. So that is a bit of context. A few words about the mobility policy, and I must say that what I will be talking about, we have seen it in the presentation of Victoria just before. We don't call it car-free city, we call it good move. And we have an acronym that explains exactly the same thing as Victoria did for the city of Oslo. That is, we call it the stop principle, and it is so not we don't prohibit anything. So everybody can choose the way he or she wants to walk around or commute to the city, or commute to or in the city. But we do hierarchize. So we say, firstly, we look at pedestrians and people with, yeah, I don't know the acronym in English, but with lesser mobility. Then we look at cyclists, then public transport, and latest in line is the car. We don't prohibit the car from coming to the city center, but we do want to create this new equilibrium in which we want to stimulate people choosing to going through or around the city in an active manner and not using their cars. And so the regional government created this mobility plan. It's called Good Move, in which a lot of measures are lined up. And also, and I'll get into that later, also this, what Victoria called the traffic patterns. So we call it circulation schemes, in which we want to prevent transit traffic in our the boroughs, the neighborhoods, and in which we want to stimulate this stop principle, this hierarchy. So walking, cycling, public transport, cars welcome, but firstly, we want to prioritize logistics, and then if for people who need a car, and there will always be people who need a car, of course, the car is still an option. And so in all this in the Good Move plan, all the measures we take are in favor of that. I'll talk a bit about the COVID, the crisis, and what we did during the crisis. And then I'll talk a bit more about the Good Move plan, our bike plan, so more like the structural changes we want to implement. And also look at the clock and not talking too much. So what we did together with the regional government was we were a bit afraid of that people would, once they could come back to work again, once they could go out again, that people would use their car again. Because in Brussels, you have this, like in a lot of big cities, a lot of cities in general, people more and more use different ways of moving around. But with and also public transport here in Brussels is very important. We have a very high, how do you say that, a very dense network that is heavily used, and this is still growing massively in terms of users and also the network itself. And so we were afraid the fact that public transport was not disencouraged because of the COVID crisis. We were afraid that a lot of people would go back using their cars, and that would create a congestion that we will not be able to cope with, so that the city would be locked by car traffic jams. And so with the regional government, we launched a project to create 40 kilometers of extra bike lanes. And I can tell you now that we managed to create 38 kilometers of that, and of the promised kilometers. And there were different projects in which we even created more than the 40 kilometers. So this is something we did to encourage people, to also to encourage people to invest in infrastructure, safe infrastructure for cyclists. That is in Brussels it's a problem, but also to give a powerful signal. And I think that was also very important, that for people who were thinking about changing their way of moving around, to give the signal that, okay, if you choose to cycle, that the different governments are there, and we will do everything to make sure that it's comfortable and it's safe for you to use your bike. So this is an example. Now you see it's a picture with normally this is really this is the Rue de la Loi, one of the most important income access by car to the city of Brussels. And so what we did is we created, you can see it, it's a temporary intervention. You know, it's not a structural, we didn't do a réaménagement of the whole street. But here what we did is we took a car lane and we made a bidirectional cycle lane of it. And you see on the right side of the picture here, so this is the existing car lane. You see that this was way too small. On the other side, you have the same thing. So we created this, and now we are working on a new project to do a complete makeover of the streets, but integrate these bicycle lanes. And so this is one thing that was very important, also symbolic, and to just give space to the bike in the city center. Another thing, what we did is we have a big park forest in the south of the city. It's called Bois de la Cambre. And what we did is in the COVID crisis, people had to stay at home. And in Brussels, as in maybe not in Oslo, but in lots of cities, there is a lack of green space. And here we wanted to give a signal that we wanted to give back this green space to the Brussels people, the people of Brussels, and we practically completely pietonized. We made it car-free practically completely. So we limited the use of the park, which was a transit axe to get into the city center from the south of Brussels. And we really limited the space to cars to the minimum. And what you see in the picture here below, now this space can be used by people with the steps, children playing. We have a lot of bikers now going through the park to get into the city center. So you can see the evolution of the Bois de la Cambre here. Before it was, you see a lot of people, some horses, a lot of people. Then it was all cars, and now again we give this green space back to the people, back for other use than just transit. And that is something that is really important. That in the mindset of people, or the vision of a city, is that streets, public space must become a destination instead of a transit axe. We need transit, but we limit this access to a minimum to get into the city. But instead of transit, now we give space. And what is amazing in the Bois de la Cambre, and what is the force of this change that it was highly contested, but is now really almost perfectly accepted, is that it is used. It is not people were telling that nobody would come to the park. No, it's even has been a place where people have come to manifest against all the COVID rules and stuff. And every time the sun shines, people are everywhere. And we also, I think, we also created, but the slide is missing. We also created the skate park on the asphalt. That is quite symbolic as well. So we reuse the space where there used to be cars. Now people are skiing and skating on the asphalt. So to give an example, this is the Bois de la Cambre. So it's quite big. You know, this is one of the Brussels communes, St. Joost. And so this whole space we practically made car-free completely. So what we did to manage the traffic, of course, we made sure that we did a lot of interventions to fluidify the traffic that going along the park. And what we saw is we have been taking measurements day-to-day basis, that the trajectories, they didn't heavily change. So the people don't lose time with this new reorganization of the traffic. And so an important project, and that was through COVID that we decided on doing it. And now we are quite happy that we can keep it that way. Other things we did is to stimulate people moving actively by walking and biking. We created an zone de ronde, what's the name in English? A zone where pedestrians have the priority. So in the whole, everything that is white, you see that pedestrians have the priority. So cars have to watch out for people just moving around in the streets. They can cross the streets wherever they want. And so that's an important signal that we wanted to give as well, that pedestrians have priority. The yellow thing here, yellow is everything that is already pedestrian zone. So you can see that it's quite a lot. And everything that is blue, that is these are there you can drive with the car 30 kilometers per hour. So these are the roads where you have a lot of car traffic. So there the statue is 30 kilometers per hour. Here it's 20, and so priority for pedestrians. And in the pedestrian zone, of course, cars are not allowed. The pedestrian zone was already there, but what we changed is giving this priority in the whole of the city center to pedestrians. And so we did a lot of tactical urbanism as well. And so we created these traffic filters to prevent transit traffic in certain areas, to increase road security and also stimulate people again moving around actively. The more sure it is for people to take their bike, the more willingly they will be to bike in a city. The picture here is was just a road where cars were allowed. It's a very commercially important road, and there it was the shop owners who actually asked us to make a pedestrian zone. And so you see that the logic has been changing. Before the shop owners were against everything that it was car free, and now they're actually asking to be integrated in the bigger pedestrian zone. So a little different interventions we did together with this is my colleague of Excel. So we really looked also around to have this coherence between cities, between communes, and also with the regional level. So this is here the pedestrian zone we created, and it really works. So before it was just cars, and now it's terraces and nice to hang out. Now a few words about the bigger themes that we are working on. So what we did in 2019, 1 year after we were, after I was in office as an alderman of mobility, we launched this bike plan. And the importance of the plan was that it was something much more than just me telling me what I was planning to do. But here you see the whole, it's called I don't know if the whole of the local government, all the politicians who are responsible. I managed to get them all on the bike. And why was that important? Because in everything, if you want to make a city bike friendly, you need everybody. You need the green space, the one who's responsible for green space to allow bikes going into the green spaces. You need the one responsible for housing to be able that in new building blocks that are constructed, that there are bike parkings integrated immediately in the new projects that are developed. You need the mayor because he's responsible for the police, and the police is really a very important partner in creating this livable city that is bike friendly. I'll get into that later. You need the element of sports and events to make sure that when Metallica comes, Metallica has at our venue has a bike parking, and the group actually themselves also called up to people to come by bike to their concert. You need the element of commerce to also to spread the word that bikers are also shoppers, and so that's very important to have this coherent policy and on all the different levels, on all the different competency policies that is integrated. So I was quite happy that we managed to do that. And so this is our bike police. They are the most popular police service in Brussels, and the most restrictive. So they give the most of the parking tickets of any of the police of the different segments. It's around I thought it's around 800,000 parking tickets that they give. So they give it to cars that are double parked, so to cars that create an insecure situation for active users. And I can really say that it really changes. So you can see now, if we we create bike lanes that are marked, so not separated bike lanes. Less and less cars are double parked. They call it double parked on bike lanes. So that really increases the security of pedestrians and of cyclists. And we see here the results as well were quite amazing. That in the Corona year, so last year, we see an augmentation of 60% of bikers on the whole of 2020. In September, you see the number 87% more people were cycling in Brussels. And we see everywhere, all the numbers show that there is really, people are choosing more and more to bike in Brussels, and that it's a really good sign. So here we created, what we did here, the two examples is, so there were two bike, it was a lane with two car lanes. And what we did is we took one away and we created bike lanes in markings. But it's also like we cannot redo the whole city in once. So the markings are, we do the markings. And while we're working on a new project that is a bigger project to really redo the whole street. So to have more effects more quickly, the markings are necessary. And the markings sometimes we get criticism by cyclists that it's not enough, it's not safe enough. We know that, but it is one step along the way. And so other things we are doing is these parkings on street and off street. The box you can see is for people who don't have space in their house, in their apartment, so that they can safely park their bike. Also, something we do is we want to get everybody on the bike, and bikes are expensive. You quickly pay 300 to 400 euros, and you can go as crazy as you want, of course. But we also want that everybody can buy a bike, and that's why we invest heavily on bicycle markets, brocantes, where you can sell second-hand bikes. And we also put on, also we know that there is we have to do more effort getting women on a bike, because the infrastructure is too car oriented for the moment. And so we do a lot of programs with local, association groups, to get more women on the bike as well. And I'm quite happy that you see more and more diversity. The diversity of Brussels is more, you can see it more and more on the bike, because before it was really something for male, and more like even the highly educated male who is quite assertive in traffic, who dares to bike. And now you can see a lot of mothers, fathers with the kids in the cargo bike, and it's really a change that is going on, and it's really nice to see this evolution. We have a lot of projects as well where when we redo a street, we make sure that it is bike friendly. So here you can see that is some project that we're working on, in which we are integrating bike lanes. And so now to close off the presentation. So this is, I think, in Victoria talked about it for Oslo. So we are working on this new traffic pattern. And also, I think it was very interesting what you said. We will also try to limit the most of the changes we'll do will be with traffic signs, but there will be some interventions, and we call it traffic filters, where we will have to do something physical. And also the thing we're working on is that when we do something physical, it needs to be as flexible as possible. And it's sometimes a bit of a contradiction, because it's like traffic is like water. If you leave something open, well, the traffic will follow. And so, but why is it important that you have this flexibility? And I think in the what came out of the presentation of Victoria is the goods distribution, and that is really something very important in a city like Brussels. I mean, in a capital city where you have a lot of economic activity. Is how do you organize the goods distribution and the good deliveries in your city center? And it's a bit of a contradiction, because for the goods distribution, they need to be able to go as fluidly as possible around the city. But for them to be able to move around fluidly, you need less traffic in your city as well. And so you need to get the transit traffic out, but you need to, and we call that the born, it's like bollards, but flexible bollards, in which you will organize the access with a badge or something, or code, and that will give some more flexibility to the goods distribution. And for also we could give it more flexibility to people who live in a certain street, but it will prevent traffic transit, and it's the same objective as in Oslo, is this transit traffic that we want to reduce. I mean, we're certain that if we can reduce this transit traffic, that will how you say that, fluidify the traffic in general in our city center. And so the idea is, so you can see it here on the left side, you have these different neighborhoods, corridors, and now all the cars drive through the neighborhoods. What we want in our ideal plan is that they drive around, but that the street, their destination remains accessible. And so this is here, this is our perimeter, this is where we're working on at the moment. And will be, we don't have yet implemented the new traffic scheme, but it's something that we will be doing next summer. So we're working on it now for the moment. And so here you can see in the model shift, we are how you say that, expecting if we do nothing. And this is if we implement the good move plan. So this is the region. These numbers come from the regional government who wants to implement this principle in the different neighborhoods of Brussels. And what we did is we launched the whole process, where you can see here is we asked the people who live there, who work there, to also help us with the first phase is the diagnose what is going well and what is going wrong in our city center. And so we're now analyzing the data and creating a new traffic pattern for the Pentagon. So this is more information on the whole process that is going on. Don't look at the dates because we had to replan. COVID really, made it much more difficult, and we had to, how to say that, reprogram our process. But voila, this is. If you have more questions on the process, the good move process, I can answer it later on. And so why is it so important in this Vélorution? Because the best bike plan is a traffic scheme. If you reduce car traffic in your neighborhoods, automatically it will create more space for other users, and so it will attract more people on moving around by bike. And so that's why, if you get rid of the transit traffic in your city centers, in your neighborhoods, automatically, and you also have to do some infrastructural interventions, automatically that will increase. I mean, people will more rapidly take their bike because they know that less traffic means safer roads. And so you're not obliged to, in every street, construct separate bike lanes. If you reduce the traffic in general, people will be, and we have a lot of examples in that in other cities as well, use their bike much more often. And so well, I think I'll wrap up here. We have lots of other projects as well. One of the projects that I'll maybe just hint is that in our in the different mobility measures we do, we start from the most vulnerable, and these are the children, and we have a specific scheme that works around school neighborhoods. And so to make sure that the neighborhood of the school is a secure environment, again, to stimulate parents to come by bike with their kids to the school, and also to learn, or to make sure that kids, that they want to bike, that they feel safe using a bike, and again, put this whole change in progress. So if you learn biking at a young age and you feel secure, that you'll keep on biking once you're older. Here, we also, like all cities, we work on parklets and intervention, because it's quite difficult to renovate the whole street. It takes time, it takes a whole procedure, it's long, and people don't understand always why it has to take so much time. So we really also put into this temporary measures to already make a change, and also that we can able to show the people why we're doing it. We're not complicating life of people driving around by car, but what we do is we create more safe space for people who walk, bike. We create more clean air, and we plant trees. We make sure that the whole city center is a place where you want to go to. We make sure that people want to come to shop, to live in our city center, and that is what we do. So we want to create of our neighborhoods destinations instead of just transit routes. And I think I know there's still one slide. Okay, one slide, and this is, then I'll wrap up, sorry, together with the regional government, we also implemented Zone 30. So the whole region of Brussels, instead of these orange lines, are, you can drive maximum 30 per hour. So that's also an important measure in terms of road security, which we implemented not even 1 year ago. So yeah, as it says, 2021. Voila. And just to wrap up, it's if you want to create a bike-friendly city, you need to invest in people being able to change their habits. So car sharing is very important, and also continue to invest in public transport. As I said, and the network is already quite good, but there are some spots in Brussels that don't have a comfortable public transport network, and so we're creating a new tram line, different tram lines. Also, the metro is being extended, and this car sharing is very important to stimulate people. Not having a car, as I said, you can drive around with a car, but having a car, using a car is different than having a car, and that's also a mentality we try to change in the city of Brussels. Thank you very much for the attention. I hope I wasn't too long, and if there are any questions, shoot.
Thank you very much, Bart, for the presentation of the initiatives in Brussels. I think I see a lot of similarities between the project in Oslo and also the one in Brussels. Just an example is, for instance, the monitoring, really creating very hard facts that convince on the one side the public, but also the politicians in going along and coming along and continuing of changing the urban environment. Yeah, so we would now be open for questions. As a starter, there are 3 questions in the chat. Maybe I can start with the latest questions asked because they address both of you. I would like to ask you, Bart and Victoria, how important is it to convince shop owners upfront? And the second question is, what's your experience on the most convincing arguments for convincing shop owners of the changes? Maybe Victoria, as your presentation was first, you can maybe start. That would be nice. Thanks.
Sure. So it is important to have user involvement, and of course to have as many people in the neighborhood on board as possible. So I would always encourage you to do engagement with whoever the interests are, be it shop owners or residents in the streets. The shop owners and businesses in the city center for car-free city life were most concerned about 2 things, and that was access for the customers, where would they park, and access for the deliveries, and how would they get the deliveries. Regarding parking, we did remove over 800 on-street public parking spaces, but within the same area, there is still, I want to say, over 1,000 parking spaces in private parking garages, which are not operated by the city. And so there is still a very high availability of parking. It's just that people now have to walk a little further if they're going to go to a particular store, and they can no longer park necessarily right out front unless perhaps they have a handicap permit. And And of course, another argument is that when you increase walking and biking, you still naturally get more foot traffic because people are going at a slower speed. They probably have better time to stop and look through a window. Whereas when you're driving by, it's a lot harder to kind of do what I call an impulse shop, where you stop and look and maybe go into a store that seems interesting, especially if you're in your car and then you're dependent on finding a parking space, and it's just a lot more hassle. So that was also a good argument. And then when it comes to access for delivery vehicles, early on in the planning process, there was a rather involved process of speaking to both delivery companies and shops, like the major shopping centers, to figure out what is the frequency and demand for deliveries, where do they occur, and when we looked at a reallocation of street use, where was it necessary to then establish the delivery zones. We still haven't quite gotten it right based on our most recent user surveys in 2019, but we're still working on optimizing where those spaces are relative to where the demand is for those shopping centers.
Thank you very much. So you really went out and talked to the shop owners and asked for their needs and wishes, and then included this in the planning, tried to include this in the planning process. Then,
yeah, there's a lot of different competing priorities, of course, but that was one among the things that were considered.
Okay, thank you very much. Bart, do you have recommendations from your experience?
I think the problems are the same. So parking and logistics, that are the things that the shop owners are afraid of or critical about. So what we did is what we did in the process, the slide I showed you about with lots of images, is that we did the whole tour of all the different shop committees,
commercial committees, yeah.
Commercial committees, and so we asked them about their problems and issues and how we could address them. And so what came out of that is that yeah, you have to be accessible, but the signaling parking, public parkings, and we have in Brussels, we have a lot of parkings off-street parking. We have a lot of them. We have around for a zone in which 50,000 people live, the city center, the Pentagon, they call it. We have almost as much parkings, and so that's I mean, an enormous amount. But the parkings are also for housing, so there's not just public parkings. But the thing is that we're working on mutualizing the existing parkings off street, and so that helps us when you have a plan to reduce, to increase, to put a bicycle lane, or to plant trees, or to make a playground or something. Then we really actively look, okay, which are the parkings that are off street, and which of them are used or not used well enough. And so by looking for solutions, you need to have a dialogue with your shop owners, and then really look for solutions. And I think if you find the parking spots off street, that's already an enormous step you do. So because in the mentality of a lot of visitors, you can always say we do have parkings, but they're a bit further away, or you maybe won't be able to park in the street or in front of the shop, but there is parking spaces there and there and there. And what we try to work on then is make sure that they are visible. So the good signing of the parkings. And for the logistics as well, we're really flexible in creating new, not drop-off zones, but loading zones. And we're quite flexible in doing that. But you need to have this dialogue and come with solutions for their problems. But because the problem is often not the traffic sheen, but it's other things. And if you can work on these other things, then you can really progress in your city.
Thank you. I think it's also, it sounds like it's quite important to consult with the different actors to avoid that you get into a deadlock situation where you have hardened fronts and you cannot find a compromise because you haven't asked the right people before implementing some measures. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Bart. I would like to ask whether the public or the listeners today have some questions to Victoria or Bart.
I see there's a question about the parking ratio. So
yes,
new buildings, it's in Brussels, it's still 1-on-1. So one apartment is one parking, but we're working, the regional government is working on rules to reduce that. And also what we are working on is that the fact that if you create parking, that the parking is easily, mutualized by others, because what we have a lot is that people don't buy their garage and they just put their car on the street, and that's a problem because we can't use the parking that is available in the building. So we're working on that. When you still build parkings, then they can be used. In the city center, the rules are more strict, because if you have good public transport, good alternatives, then the one-on-one rule doesn't apply. But it's still too much, I think. I think maybe in Oslo it's more restrictive. I heard that there they even now don't build any parkings anymore. So, but in Brussels we're not there yet.
Yeah, I have to say I've been trying to look it up on my other screen. It's parking is unfortunately, like the building codes and parking requirements is unfortunately regulated by another agency, not mine. So I don't know the definite answer, so I don't want to quite say, but I could follow up and send an email to Sebastian afterwards with that answer, because I don't want to say anything incorrect online right now.
You know, I think your answer, thanks for looking that up. That would be nice, and we can maybe share it also with the audience today. I think for Luxembourg, at least, this is very restrictive. So, and parking is a highly politicalized topic here in the country. So for every new project, you usually enter into very intense discussions. I've seen that there are some further questions in the chat. Maybe I would like to address them to you now. Just give me a second to read them through. Yes, the questions address both of you again concerning the test phases. Have you implemented any test phase before making any definite fixes to or definite changes to the public infrastructure in both cities, in Oslo and in Brussels?
It happened. Yeah, we use it a lot. The test phase to. The advantages of a test phase is that you can go, you can do something more rapidly. You have a direct effect on something, and along the way you have to prepare your how do you call it, your building permit, and it takes a lot of time. You also want to do that on a, I mean, we want to do that on a with the participation trajectory, and so it gives you the opportunity to already test. Okay, will this work or something else? Also, in terms of what will we do with the public space, it does help. Yeah. So yes, we use this test a lot actually as a first phase, and then 1 year later we see, okay, does it work? And if it works, okay, we keep it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so really also getting the feedback of the potential future users or the actual users, and do the measures work as intended, and then deciding from this point on whether you implement them, whether you amend them, or whether you don't implement them at all. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
Victoria, do you have similar experiences in Oslo?
I don't know that I have much to add other than, yes, piloting different measures and going forward with temporary changes first before more permanent change has also been very important in Oslo, especially since some of the changes we wanted to make did require zoning change. And so it was easy to, at first, put up a sign rotating the travel direction or reducing it to 1 lane and whatnot, but it took time to get the zoning change approved so that we could make permanent changes. And for example, in one road where we established, which had previously been two-way, two-directional, and now it's one direction with bike lanes on both sides, we also installed bicycle traffic lights at every intersection, so that took time as well. So definitely starting with temporary measures, one-off road closures on the weekends, for example, to see what was user feedback, what were the traffic counts, where did the traffic go in those time periods, was very important.
You see, Rome was also not built on a single day, but stepwise processes. Yeah. Okay, thank you for your answer. There are two more questions which I think are directed at Bart. The one is concerning the measures that you implemented in the European district. Did you experience any differences when implementing the measures in the European district, which were different from those measures implemented in the other districts? And the second question is whether you've experienced any negative feedback or consequences of the closing down the city center for car access.
Related to the European quarter, we did some interventions, but not really big ones. And so now one that we are working on is the picture I showed you of where we will do a whole, we'll redo the whole street. It's called the Clovis lane. There we did get a lot of, how do you say that, negative feedback of the residents. So not really of the institutions. I don't know if that is what your question. Also about the European quarters, we do have a very active cyclist committee of the European functionaries and the people who work for the European institutions who help us actually pushing for measures. So we don't really get a lot of from the institutions. We don't get negative feedback. We do try to have a good dialogue with all our, I mean, with everybody. There's a big project on Schumann that is going on. It's the regional government that is working on that one. And it's more impact on the bigger, how do you say that, circulation scheme of the whole area, actually, that is in line of that. And there, the European institutions are asking for to invest in this public space at the Schumann area. Regarding to the Boulevard Anspach, the city center, there, yes, we did. It was the previous local government who decided on it, and it was heavily contested, very heavily contested, and that was a bit. Yeah, people were afraid that the city center would be cut off. People wouldn't be able to come to the city center. That it would not be accessible. That was one element, and another element was what you have. What Joe puts in his question, it was exactly that there was an impact on the streets around, on the neighborhoods around. The impact was, how do you say that? The mobility service, they said it was limited, but we do still have an important transit traffic in the areas around the pedestrian zone. And so that is something that we're working on now. Actually, this pedestrian zone was a very important first step, and the city is never finished. So we will continue to have to work on getting the whole city, the mobility in the city, reorganize the mobility in our different quarters. And so there was we did saw in some neighborhoods that the traffic, they searched their way into the more smaller roads in the different neighborhoods. So that was something with the diagnose we are doing on the Good Move plan we're doing right now, that's something that came out of the research we did. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Are there further questions from the audience?
Sebastian, I see there was a question to me earlier from Frank regarding, I guess a couple of years ago, he was in Oslo and noticed some security and protection measures. And how is that part of the car-free concept? So you are correct. The car-free city life, city center area either encompasses or is just adjacent to some very critical assets in Norway, the Parliament building, the Royal Palace, and the government quarter, which was bombed 10 years ago. So that is an important consideration. Security is an important consideration, and a lot of those buildings have security perimeters that do expand into our project area. And so, for example, a lot of the pedestrian streets have very, very large, heavy planters that prohibit vehicles from being able to sneak in and drive to prevent any further bombings within the proximity of those buildings. And we are very much coordinating now with the project to reconstruct the government quarter that was damaged on that terrorist attack. That project began last year, and it will go through the next 3 or 4 years. So there's very tight coordination between the city and the state agency responsible for rebuilding the government quarter, because as part of the perimeter security and as part of the like goods receiving area for the new government quarter, that's directly affecting our driving pattern, access to certain streets. And so we are changing some of the restrictions to even more restrictive than we had originally planned in order to accommodate the security needs of the new government quarter. So it is, again, definitely an integral part of our project.
Thank you for answering this question, Victoria. We would now have some time for further questions from the audience. Let the silence do its work. If none, then I would like to thank you, Victoria and Bart, for the 2 very interesting presentations from the project. I see indeed quite a lot of similarities, and I think both approaches are really, really interesting and work with the local specificities that you have identified in your cities, and are not just individual measures or projects, but have a more strategic dimension in changing really the mobility behavior of residents and transit traffic in the city. For closing words, I would like to hand over to Lex again, and thank you very much from my side as well.
Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you to Victoria and Bart. This was the last of our sessions for the CIPU Colloque for this year. We're hoping that most of the people who joined us today have been here for some of the other sessions. If not, we recommend that you check our YouTube channel for all the recordings of the previous presentations. So thank you a lot for your interest, and we'll hopefully see you again next year for another round of CIPU Colloques. Thank you, and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye-bye.